Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 11 of the Awkwardly Big Dice podcast. I am your host, Dan, and with me, as usual, my co host is Rob.
Hello.
We'll be talking about our usual favourite subject, which is Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop role playing games, because much of what we talk about can also be applied to other games in a more general sense, of course.
Very true.
Please before you watch the rest of the podcast, or you can wait till the end, but it'd be great if you do it now. Subscribe to our YouTube channel, give us a like, check out our other videos. Also, head over to Instagram and to Twitter, where we also have accounts that you can follow. I believe the terminology of both of those.
Yes.
But no pressure. I guess you don't have to, but you do have to. If you want the dice gods to be happy, they demand it.
Except for you, Joe.
Except, well, Joe's luck is he may as well go and pray to the dice devils, I guess.
Yeah, I think he needs to push it the other way.
Some sort of favor is needed for Joe, and I don't think we can help as much as we might be priests of the dice gods. Uh, we're not going to be able to aid in improving his rolls. He's been alright recently. He's been alright recently.
He rolled a natural 20 last session, so
He did. Might be the first time. But
maybe second.
don't know if it's when he actually really wanted it to be a natural 20, but he got a natural 20. I'm pretty certain he was unhappy with getting the natural 20 when he got it. I'm pretty certain. Um,
Aren't we all?
no, not you should. I'm pretty happy to get a natural 20. Especially with our current ruling on get natural 20 gets your inspiration.
Oh, I like that rule. We're taking that into stride on my other group.
That's good. If something
Sticking with it.
works, why not keep it? Work for us. So we will begin with the old, a little bit of news. Obviously, big news across all of the world. Awkwardly Big Dice is now exclusive to YouTube. We're not doing live streaming on Twitch. Sure, all our like 2 Twitch followers are disappointed, but uh,
Sorry, Steph.
but we're moving to focus on YouTube and produce our podcasts on there, and obviously you can find them on Spotify and on Apple Podcasts as well. If you have a request for it to go on any another podcast service, let us know in the comments below.
Aye.
Yes, we'll start with a little bit of a D&D news that I just discovered. Though I didn't, it's not D&D news. We'll call it a tabletop role-playing game news, and that is that at BlizzCon a few days ago, there was an announcement by Blizzard, as you would expect at BlizzCon,
Would be the case usually.
that there will be a Diablo. They've announced a Diablo tabletop role-playing game
Fair
and
enough.
board game, apparently, whatever it means by tabletop role-playing game and board game. But they are doing that, I believe, in conjunction with a group called Glass Cannon Unplugged and a Genuine Entertainment, or 2 groups, I suppose.
Fair enough. I'd be interested to see how that works out because Diablo as a game is very much more focused on that one pillar, really, more than anything of combat, loot, that sort of thing.
Mm.
Uh, don't get me wrong, I actually really like the lore of that Diablo universe. I
Yeah.
think it's quite rich and interesting, especially since sort of from Diablo 2 to 3 and 3 onwards. 4, I have mixed feelings about, but that's probably just because of the game as well. But so I'll be interested to see how that kind
Mm.
of turns out. If it is like a proper role play, intensive thing, or if it's a bit more like beers, dice, dungeon crawling.
From what I quickly scanned, they haven't announced too much, but it has, yeah, they've said it. They will be related to the board game and TTRPG were related to each other. It's gonna have you obviously set in the Diablo universe of Sanctuary
Yeah.
and beyond. I don't know. It just feels a bit cheeky for Blizzard or who is it now? Xbox technically. Um,
Yeah.
to be doing a Kickstarter.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like, because on the website I've read, it says, which is Escapist magazine, it says, while little is known about the gameplay, players are eager for a more physical loot grinding experience can join the pre-order campaign over on Kickstarter when it goes live on as yet an unspecified date. The game is officially set to launch in fall 2024.
Not surprising.
But I'm like, Kickstarter, really? That's you can't afford to do it any other way. Big, massive conglomerate uh, corp.
Classic Bobby, that though, isn't it? Is he still the CEO now that Microsoft have bought him?
Well, is he not the dude who got kicked out though
Oh, I
for
don't
all the
know.
sexual abuse stuff?
Oh no, he didn't get kicked out. He wasn't part of it. He just
Mm.
part of that. He just was a CEO. Bobby, what's his name? He's just like he looks like. If you look at him, if you could compare a person to an animal, you'd look at him and go, "That's a shark." Hundred
I
percent.
yeah, they'll be run as subsidiaries of Xbox games, won't they? Which in itself is a subsidiary of Microsoft. I guess they should have more money. Is the whole point? Is there big backing
Yeah,
money? Yet they're gonna go to kick. It's just so cheeky to go to Kickstarter. Like, you can understand like the smaller guys doing your you know, two guys trying to make a tabletop game, test their new
yeah.
mechanics out and whatnot. You can completely understand Kickstarter or any other sort of
If they
funding
can't get
platforms.
like the right level of investment because they're a small company, indie companies, that sort of stuff, then yeah, that's what Kickstarter's for. It's not for rich companies to say fund the game before we make it. No.
It just feels it's a bit, and we all, it just reminds me because like Blizzard these days really love microtransactions. Um,
Just
it's how they're gonna squeeze that into a board game and a tabletop game. You, every monster will cost you
there's going to
like
be RFID tags on
yeah,
the board that link directly to your PayPal. It's like scan that to move forward 4 spaces in the battle pass.
yeah, so stupid. But yeah, it probably will be something like that.
I mean, they love money so much they just need to release Monopoly.
They are basically
That's
doing that. They are trying to create a monopoly in video games, I think
yeah,
Microsoft.
that's
Sony
what I meant. Yeah,
Sony's the only one who's standing their ground really, because Nintendo will just stick to their little corner and don't bother anybody else.
yeah.
But
Sony's doing its own version, but it's a better version. But yeah, well, that's a different conversation. I suppose we are a TTRPG podcast, not a video games podcast. And
uh,
that is a big rant that I don't really want to take the lid off right now when I'm
I
feeling a
mean,
bit ill.
yeah, it's a game. It's a game, and it's the
It
game
is.
in the word, in the letters, the G at the end, TTRPG. But yes, we won't go down that rabbit hole. Instead, let us go to our usual topics of spell of the week and monster of the week. Our
Dice roll tonight.
our dice rolls will determine who gets to pick who goes first and who goes last. I'm guessing because we've never really give like a value to which is better, the first or last. Um, so we choose. But shall we roll?
Yes, today I am using a glow in the dark green dice that I got from Goblin Dice.
Very nice.
Got a
I
full
think
set.
I'm using one I think I've used before, which is just my red and blue mix one.
There you go.
That was not a good roll.
Go on then, what you get?
Got a 4.
I still beat you. I didn't get a great roll. I got a 9.
You got a middling roll.
Yeah, as I said, not great, but not bad.
Middling.
So,
So it's your choice.
so
You make the
today
choice.
I've got a monster. You've got a spell.
Hmm
Can't remember what order we went in last week.
I went
Um,
first last week.
Well, I'll go first this week then. Get it out of the way.
Sure.
So, this week I'm going for a monster that I have used quite a few times because I have run Curse of Strahd and I'm about to start running Curse of Strahd for my other group. I'm going for the Vampire Spawn this week.
What a surprise! Vampires, Rob?
I know, I
Who would it?
know,
Wait, you like vampires? I didn't.
they're all right.
Uh, uh,
They're okay.
last week's podcast was a lie. You
Yeah,
you stated you
absolutely.
love vampires.
I love them. Yeah, they're one of my favorite fantasy-based creature types, whatever you want to call it. Vampire spawns. They
Hmm.
are typically the minion of a full-fledged vampire or a vampire lord.
Yeah,
Typically somebody who has an extreme control over his minions or her minions. Strahd is, as you would expect, somebody who can create vampire spawns, and it kind of sticks to the typical lore uh, of how they're created. That a vampire must bite somebody, then kill them. In the D&D world, they have to then bury them in the earth, leave them a day or so, and out grows a vampire spawn.
of course. As soon as you're a vampire as well, you must remember you apparently just become like 20 times sexier by
Yeah,
apparently being a vampire, as per the rules of like every
Astarion.
vampire TV show or movie. I was actually thinking True Blood, to be honest with you. Um,
I've still not seen that. I should watch that.
but yeah, it's just the rules apparently.
They're pretty much as you kind of would expect. Very typical to the trope. Decent armor class, quite a lot of HP, standard movement, quite dexterous, quite strong. Because they're spawns, they don't really have much in the smart characteristics. Intelligence and wisdom are both a flat +0. A tiny bit of charisma. But these are really the henchmen of the vampire. They're quite a good one because you can take a few of them uh, to support like a boss fight of the vampire lord. Quite good there. Or you can take one or two against some lower level players and really give them a challenge. They're quite versatile in my opinion that way.
Mm,
Challenge rating 5 kind of speaks for itself there.
mm.
They've got
Uh,
some very
mm.
carry on.
I was just gonna say yeah, five, but don't take five as a serious thing.
No,
So no. My only thing on that is when you were saying you can obviously you can use them for a variety of groupings, I suppose.
yeah,
You can also, if you want to have a vampire that is but your party are at a lower level, so you're playing like a proper first tier play, 1 to 5, but you don't want to throw a full vampire or whatever other type of vampire there are at the place. You could just take the spawn off the end of the name and use this as well.
yeah, absolutely. The players don't need to know it's a vampire spawn, and nothing about the vampire lore or anything else suggests that they lose their uh, intelligence. Like they're still flat 0, so like flat +0, that is not an actual 0. So they've got average intelligence, average wisdom, so they're as smart as most people in that respect, I suppose. The abilities are kind of the ones that you would expect. The stereotypical ones. They've got regeneration, so they regenerate 10 hit points at the start of each of their turns, as long as they have at least 1 hit point. This doesn't work if you have them stood in sunlight, specifically sunlight. So if you're casting spells, make sure you look for the word sunlight and not just light or daylight or anything like that.
Hmm.
Unless your GM is a bit more blasé with that. But if you've got a rules as written GM, you need to make sure you're doing that right. Have them stood in running water, or if they take some radiant damage from holy water or a spell or whatever, you turn it off for a turn, basically. So you need to keep applying that effect to
Hmm.
stop it switching its regeneration back on. It doesn't have to use an action to switch it on, it is just a static feature. They've got spider climb, so they can go up and down surfaces, across vertical surfaces. So remember that as well, because a lot of people forget that. It's quite easy to sometimes kind of just go and regress back to a flat playing field when you're in a fight sometimes. Make them climb walls, make them run across the ceiling, make them pull their victims up.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, the most
have,
interesting aspect of a fight is is it is when a DM uses 3 dimensions, not just two.
Yeah, absolutely. Have them break into the second or third stories of buildings. Do that sort of thing. It's really good. They've got some weaknesses because vampires are very notably in all their mythos usually have some good weaknesses. They cannot enter a residence unless they have an invitation from one of the occupants.
Hmm.
A little bit of a weaker version of the weakness that you'll see in a lot of ones where it's like the property owner has to invite them in. You don't have to worry about that. D&D is a bit too complex for that to be needed. They are harmed by running water. They take some acid damage if they end their turn in running water. So play the vampires like they would know that as well.
Hmm.
Like, don't just go, oh no, they ended their turn in a river, take some damage. They'll know that. So play around that. Only do it if they've got no other choice, but allow players to kind of try to trap them in that position as well. Uh, Standard stake to the heart. The vampire is destroyed if a piercing weapon made of wood is driven into its heart while it is incapacitated or in its resting place. Vampires typically will have a resting place, the good old classic coffin trope.
Hmm.
Uh, and they have the sunlight hypersensitivity. They take radiant damage every turn they start their turn in direct sunlight. While in sunlight, they have disadvantage on attack rolls and ability checks.
Yeah.
So, they're going to be something that will attack inside, at night, underground, in caves.
Vampires are interesting because they have the literal weaknesses written
Yeah,
like out in a full thing. You don't get that a lot of time. You'll get your whole like with your resistances. You might also get what's the opposite of the resistance vulnerability.
vulnerabilities.
You occasionally get vulnerabilities, but it's not like as specific as what you do get with the vampires. And it's quite interesting because that's good because I think obviously generally when you are creating a player character or monsters, if you're the DM sort to do that,
Yep.
you come up with weaknesses for your character, flaws as they are if you go by the build of the book. Um, and this is kind of like having physical flaws, and they're kind of fun to introduce anyway. Like it's always that whole thing of like some monsters you might just have make them nocturnal anyway because you want to,
Yes.
or they only operate in these environments, or that they only like. There's some things like you only get information from reading the lore and learning that that yeah these creatures will only attack when threatened. It doesn't say that in their stat block.
No, it's certainly worthwhile. Thinking about that. But they're a vampire as well, so play with that predatory instinct, the hunger, the desire to feed. Um, they've got the typical attacks you would expect. They've got a claw attack and a bite attack, and they can make two attacks, uh, one of which could be a bite attack. One of the most interesting things for me about vampires is something that typically shocks players. Is that when they make a claw attack, instead of having to make a check to grapple somebody, you could just forego doing any damage and just grapple someone. No save, no fuss, no muss. You are grappled. And then the next attack could be a bite attack. And the bite is quite a nasty little attack. It'll do some extra necrotic damage, and it will reduce the target's maximum hit points by the necrotic damage that it's done. Usually, if you go down to 0 hit points, if your maximum HP is down to 0, you are dead. No death saves required. So it's an interesting little thing to be both aware of and conscious of. Being vampires, being kind of very story-driven creatures, they've got a lot of regional effects. Even the vampire spawns themselves, it's got a lot of like lair effects. Not necessarily lair rules, but it's just
Yeah,
flavor.
I think the ones like for example the way of looking at it's it's interesting that a vampire spawn has a layer to me.
I think it's because the idea is that you wouldn't just have a vampire spawn, you would have a nest, as they're typically called in most mainstream media these days. Like there's a noticeable increase in the populations of bats, rats, wolves in the region. Plants within 500 feet of the lair wither, their stems and branches become twisted and thorny. Shadows cast within 500 feet of the lair seem abnormally gaunt and sometimes move as though alive. It's a lot of that kind of Bram Stoker vibe
Mm-hmm.
stuff that you see in classic Dracula. So it's really there's really good stuff there. So it's more regional effects rather than lair.
Mm-hmm.
But it does also suggest some possible lairs, but they are very stereotypical. They'll have their lair in a very defensible location, such as a castle, a fortified manor, a walled abbey. They hide in coffins in an underground crypt underneath, or a vault guarded by, this is talking about the vampire lord, because they would be guarded by vampire spawn or other loyal creatures of the night. So
Mm-hmm.
they're a really, really good creature type to use if you're having a very themed campaign, like Curse of Strahd,
Mm-hmm.
or something else related to either a domain of dread, or if you just like to go with gothic horror, you like undead as a creature type. Vampires are just a great one to have if you're running a campaign that's in a large city. It's always fun to have vampires as something if you want them to be the main thing, or if you want them to be just like a little bit of a presence that's just always there because a large city has lots of food for them. They both work, so they're very versatile, and that's probably why I like them as well. Even if you take my natural love for vampires out of them, everything that they are as a creature type, I think is fantastic and useful and very very versatile.
It's good because I always think vampires are an interesting one as well because they have the same, I don't know what you call it, the leveling up system, I guess, that dragons kind of have, where there are different types of dragon, there are different types of vampire. Um, though I think there's only really the two, right, with a vampire spawn and vampire, but vampire themselves, I think you can modify their variants, which allow you to like make them spellcasters and stuff like that.
So yeah, there are rules uh, if you are traditional and like to read from the monster manual, they are listed in there. I know there's one that wields a great sword, one
Yeah,
that wields some
it's
armor. There are spells that you can give them.
yeah. So there's the spellcaster and the warrior, I think, is the two variants. So basically give them a great sword to let them cast spells. You could do both
Yeah,
if you really want to do, and they basically kind of have Strahd, right? So,
yeah,
um, great. Again, did you mention? I don't know if you mentioned. You may have, but there's also the vampires have regeneration. We've talked about regeneration before.
yeah. Mention that
Um,
it's 'cause you switch it off with radiant damage on vampires.
mhm. I just find we always love a good regeneration in a monster because it's one of those things where you're essentially giving it more hit points without actually giving it more hit points. It's a good little
Yeah,
trick.
it's one of those things with the vampires because they've got regeneration, but there's a lot of ways to turn it off because they've got that nice big list of weaknesses,
Hmm.
and those weaknesses quite often do damage. So if you switch it off with with daylight, you're not only you're switching off the regeneration, but you're also doing damage every turn to it with whatever's causing that
Hmm.
daylight. So instead of HP going up, it's going down. So it's
Hmm.
like a
That's always good though. Like we've talked about with the troll before, saying trolls, it's fire that stops it from regenerating.
yeah
But if you're hitting with every other type of damage, but not fire, and it's still regenerating, same with them. As long as if you don't ever hit in a vampire with radiant damage or holy
yeah
war, then it's still gonna keep regenerating. It's not gonna stop. But yeah, we've used these in Stride, right? We fought these.
you certainly did.
Um,
Sometimes you fought buffed versions of them that were named NPCs that
mm,
didn't die straight away. I transferred the turn to fog when you kill them ability onto some spawns to give them a bit more of a recurring feature, like
mhm,
be story characters,
mhm,
which isn't actually in the book, but it doesn't really give you much to work with. So I thought, well, I'm gonna use these character names that it's given me, make them a bit more unique, and that's another thing you could do. You could have. We talked about that tiered hierarchy of dragons. Well, you could take some of the abilities from a vampire lord and add them to a vampire spawn.
mhm,
And if you wanted to create like a middle tier,
mhm.
that's something you can definitely do.
There you go. They're always flexible, and that's generally the case with most monsters. Obviously, you get your rule lawyers who get very stubborn about the rules and stuff. And I'll be honest with you, you get to a certain point when you've been DMing a long time, or you've been running a campaign for a long time and stuff
Yeah.
from the Monsters Manual, or even sometimes just new stuff. Even stuff from Planescape may end up being a bit too mundane or boring for you, and you want to make it more interesting. Um, Obviously not gonna say from Planescape. I've used one thing from Planescape, quite enjoyed it. It was pretty good.
Yeah.
Would use again. Um, but I have before on many occasions looked at the monster manual or Volos and gone, I like that. I like this, this, and this, but that guy's gonna go down like a sack of potatoes. So
Oh yeah.
we're gonna give him a little more hit points, put him some new armor, maybe give him a better weapon, probably a magical one. And you know what? This dude's gonna be cursed, so I'm gonna give him this, this, and that as well, something like that. Because it's always far more interesting for me to be able to not then go look, oh well, I've got this guy, but maybe there might be something else in the book that can do it for me. I just kind of go and create my own
Yeah.
from that rather than go looking for something else. Maybe I'm lazy, or maybe I just like doing it the hard way. I don't know which one it is. Probably the hard way, I think.
Yeah. No, fair enough.
But yes, Vampire Spawn is a good shout for your probably for your tier two party. Maybe yeah, early to mid leveled characters.
Yeah. Very
After a
much.
certain point, they join the ranks of the goblins and the kobolds and
They do.
don't last around. I mean, I wouldn't with what 82 hit points, even if like they have their resistances. I would have to throw a lot of these at you guys to really slow you down and not have them all die within 2 rounds, 3 rounds, maybe most.
Yeah. Yeah. Very much.
But
Quite like that about them though.
yeah,
But yeah.
we will move on from Vampire Spawn. The just looking at the art as well, I'm like, that is both creepy and they've still tried to make it a little typical vampire sex. It's like, right,
Yeah.
I'll just put like a bag over her head. I'll just cover her head. I can see it. The nails, she might have to trim those, but like the rest, we're alright.
Yes. They've kept the allure.
Yeah, it's just the red eyes are not quite a stereo, right? Not quite a
No.
stereo. He's a vampire spawn for those who
He
do
is.
not know. So we will move on to spell of the week. It is my turn, and I have chosen a spell that I consider to be a controversial spell to some degree, more in its usage rather than what it actually is, because what it actually is pretty straightforward.
Yeah. I agree.
It is the first level enchantment spell, Charm Person. Famous Charm Person. I would have it. Used by many an arcane spellcaster, your bards, your sorcerers, your warlocks, your wizards, and also some clerics and some druids. Well, I think all druids, but some clerics.
Yeah.
Um, but more importantly, it is more important or more to the point is it is a very common spell. Again, it's first level. You get limited choices. You're looking for some range. You some different types of spells. It makes sense why people would choose it. Plus an action for you to cast it, which is also a great thing as well because it's basically done very quickly within 6 seconds, and it lasts for an hour, which is a lot of a lot of time for a first level spell. And obviously, only having verbal and semantic components uh, also means no spellcasting focus or material components required.
It's true.
But
Not a concentration spell either.
it is not a concentration spell. No, it is not. I guess simply put, you cast against somebody, they need to meet your wisdom saving throw. And it does so if you're actually engaged in combat with it, so if you're fighting you or your companions are fighting it. If it fails the saving throw, it is charmed by you. until the spell ends, or until your bodies or yourself do anything harmful to it.
Yeah.
And the charmed creature regards you as a friendly acquaintance. But then once that spell runs out after an hour or until you do damage to it, it knows it has been charmed. Now, if you need a little idea of what charmed is, by the way, charmed is a condition within 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons, much like stunned or
Poison.
unconscious, I guess, poisoned, exhausted, and so on and so forth. Many. Look them up. Player's Handbook. Get it out. But a charmed creature can't attack the charmer or target the charmer with harmful abilities, and the charmer has advantage on any ability check to interact socially with the creature, which is technically the point that I consider to be the slight controversial aspect of this spell, and the bit that is commonly ignored or misunderstood. That's because
Yes, very
I've
much.
seen on more than one occasion someone gets to use his charm spell, and the next thing you know, that the target, essentially the creature targeted, just is like it's like dominated,
Yeah.
and it's not. It's literally just an advantage. You now have advantage with your charisma checks, basically, is what it gives you. It can't attack you. Again, it doesn't mean that it can't order someone else to attack you, but it can't attack you. Um, it's not that it's going to. It's going to review as your friendly acquaintance. It's not going to order someone else to attack you. By the way, that's just me being silly. But the whole thing I often have an issue with regards to this spell is that people treat it like it's a dominate spell, isn't it?
Yeah, they treat it like mind control, like full mind control.
It is literally you just get an advantage. There's no now I don't need to make a charisma check or a persuasion check
Yeah.
or deception or whatever. Yes, you still need to do those. You just do those now with advantage.
I
That is the
think my thing with this spell,
mm,
you said it at the start, like your bards learn it, your warlocks learn it, your sorcerers learn it. Getting advantage when you're a charisma based class, likely you have, or at least I find with myself, you'll have proficiency in one of the charisma based skills.
you know.
It's likely the one that you want to use, and you may, if you're a bard, you might have proficiency in persuasion, deception, and performance.
Mm,
You know, it's not unheard of. Like Fitz has got expert in
mm.
deception. He has plus 13. He doesn't need advantage.
Eh, yeah, but also Fitz is a level 9 character.
He
This is
is. He
not
is.
something really designed for a level 9 character. This is your first level, second, third level characters.
You could still take a variant human at level 1. Take the feat to get skill expert. Have expert in deception or persuasion.
Mm,
You could still have extremely high stats in those already. I think it's a great spell for the other casters. Wizards don't typically have high charisma. It can be seen as a dump stat for wizards, understandably so. I would typically dump strength usually on a wizard, but if I had to dump anything, and same for druids. I think it's a great spell, but it's a niche spell.
mm. Well, it's one that you're not going to use in combat, so that whole addendum about you know them getting advantage if you're fighting it. I mean,
Yeah,
you're probably never going to use in that situation. Like, it only really came up in what I would vote as my game of the year, Baldur's Gate 3. Um, in conversations where you get the option where you got guidance, you're going to throw on it anyway,
yeah.
and then you got, oh,
Friends.
shall I use Charm Person? As well, I've got it. Like, especially if I was brief time I played a wizard, or I had a spell scroll that was a Charm Person thing. Um, you might use it. And to be fair, there's no real disadvantage in the video game of using Charm Person like there is obviously in the actual spell.
Yes.
But yeah, it's just one of those where it's talked about this. I think I've talked about this on the podcast before. I've definitely talked about it in person and moaned about it. There's this illusion or this perception that somehow first level spells or second level spells are really powerful, and that people expect them to do amazing, wonderful things when they're not built for that. They're basics.
Yeah,
They're your basics. So you shouldn't be expecting ridiculous things from a first level spell like Charm Person. It is
no,
one of those where people do try to get all away with a lot with Charm Person. It's a bit like how people might try and get away with a lot with like Minor Illusion, for example, which is only a cantrip, which is even worse
yeah.
of a crime. Um,
It's there to grease the wheels of the conversation.
Yeah, I think it's just people wanting to do things or wanting to be useful. I think it often more comes up with a certain type of player who's likely to want to be useful in a situation and has nothing else to throw at it, and then instead of just keeping their mouth shut or staying quiet or letting someone else have a go, they just think, "Oh, can I? I will use this, and then I'm going to do that."
Yeah,
I imagine it's probably one of those things that we're at the table. Someone goes, "Oh, I've got charm person, I'll help you out." Throw a charm person on them, and that person goes, "Oh, thank you," and then it doesn't do anything for them.
yeah. It's one thing I like about the spell
Hmm.
is that when it ends, they know that you were charmed. So you've got, for me, there's like again a hierarchy of enchantment spells.
Yeah, we
There's the one
talked
that's a
about.
cantrip, which is friends.
Yeah.
At the end of that, they become hostile towards you.
Mm.
Doesn't necessarily mean they attack. They could. They might just say, "Excuse me, how dare you do that? Get the fuck out." Um,
They just
and
draw.
rightly
They
so.
draw their pots and pans and beat you over the head.
They might do that. They might get the skillet out, and you'll run into your new favorite phrase, "Uncle Consequences."
The consequences. Yeah.
Then you got charm person, where they know that they've been charmed, but they don't have to go hostile as a result. The rule doesn't say that they do. The DM can still say it. It's not. It depends on the situation, I think.
Mm.
Then you've got suggestion, which doesn't have any of that. It completely loses the knowledge that they were charmed.
Hmm.
Um,
Which we
you
talked
could
about.
still
When was that? Suggestion was
one of my first
one of
ones
your first
was
ones, wasn't it? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a favorite of mine because I really like how long it lasts, but because it's an 8 hour spell if you concentrate, and that one is a concentration spell as well, so it's got its costs there as well. Is really good. I would still be fine with the DM saying that the person that you suggested knew about the suggestion spell if the actions that they committed to was so out of character that they were like, "What came over me then? Something was done to me. I might
Yeah.
not know
Or
who did it
like I
or what
can't.
did it, but
We talked about it. I don't remember what the components were for suggestion because if it's verbal or semantic, that it's visual or audio, that
it
they
was
can
verbal.
they saw it like, well, that guy did
Yeah,
something to me. Um,
unless you were able to hide it somehow.
sleight hand check would have been enough to, or stealth, or what's like that,
Yeah,
just to
or
cover it.
there's
Yeah.
the sorcerer meta magic thing. I think that helps with that as well.
Subtle,
But
subtle something.
subtle spell maybe.
Yeah, it's like
Um, then you've got the one that everybody conflates these spells with, which is dominate person.
that. Hmm.
Dominate person is a fantastic spell when you use it correctly, and not when you're a dirty little thirsty hombag that thinks you can just use it to automatically seduce someone. Technically, you can because dominate person can make someone do anything, but just don't bring that to D&D, you weirdo.
No, because
Uh,
then aren't you the bad guy, right?
exactly, yeah. People
So,
say necromancy is the worst school. I think
mm,
we all know it's enchantment.
it's enchantment.
There's only you. You're not really a slave master if all you're doing is animating dead meat. If you're
Yeah,
actually forcing sentient creatures to do your bidding, then that's a bit different. That's a bit
yeah,
more evil.
yeah, yeah. I agreed, agreed, agreed.
As a player, I have used dominate person as a defensive spell. I do quite like looking like the first time I used it, we were against a group of not rival adventurers, but they weren't just bandits. They were kind of bandits a little bit, but there was like a leader. They had a spellcaster with them,
Hmm.
so they weren't just a bunch of bandits basically. And I took over the spellcaster's mind, and he then turned around and in the famous Danny DeVito quote from Always Sunny, he just started blasting. So anyway, he started blasting, and it
Mm.
was great. It was a really fun time. Fun times were had. You, as dominate person, you can just force the the creature that you're dominating, to do whatever you want, and that is the only dominate one.
It
Only
is important to remember that dominate person is also for only for humanoids. Should we
That is
point out?
true.
You
It's
dom you want
dominate
monster.
beast, person, and monster.
Yes.
There are three different versions of the
Monster will get
spell.
you everything.
Yeah,
As
make
long
sure
as
you do the right one.
they
That's
succeed.
uh,
Or
that's
fail,
a
sorry.
higher level spell though.
It is, yes. Not ridiculously higher, but higher level, yes.
No, no, yeah, not stupid. Not like it's not 7 plus. I think is it 5 or 6?
Yes, well, I'm gonna say
I think it's
six.
6.
Six is my
I
gut,
want to say
but
6.
I'd
Yeah.
be talking out our ass for all I know.
it, it
Wish you
has
could
been
make
known to
someone
happen.
do. Wish you could make someone do if you use dominate
Yeah,
person.
yeah. I think the thing to remember as well about dominate is it's useful as a DM.
Yeah.
It's a nasty thing to do as a DM. So I wouldn't say do it very often and be careful with what you choose to do. But dominate is the charm spell that doesn't break if you do damage to them. If because you can literally tell them to do damage to themselves. You could take over their turn in combat and just force them to do anything. So it's
Is it?
crazy silly.
Is it one where is it? I know we're doing charm person, but we're talking about enchantment spells, so
I think it's
I'm gonna
because
dive
as a
into it.
subject it causes that discussion
Yeah.
to happen.
I just wanted to know if you cannot make it hurt itself, because I know that is a thing that some enchantment spells are unable to do.
Suggestion can't do it. It specifically says you can't tell them to jump off a cliff or throw themselves on their spear or whatever.
It doesn't say so. With dominate person, it does. Every time it takes damage, get
It gets to take
another
the test
chance
again.
to do the test again. But you could theoretically, yes, have it do like commit seppuku if you wanted.
Yeah, it's because of the wording of that you can use your action to take over their turn specifically rather than
Hmm.
just giving them loose orders.
Hmm.
So I've never used it that way, but I've always thought
Fifth
could
level
do
as well,
that.
by the way.
5th level for dominate person. Dominate beast must be 4.
I've definitely got to come up with some just horrible um enemy, and not monsters, wrong word, enemy for Stormare that's an enchanter. Um, just because they can do some horrible shit, and
Yep.
I always forget about it.
Even
I always forget.
Fitz loves to use the suggestion, but the fact dominating someone would be like he would find that very
Hmm.
bad taste.
Yeah, my current villain is not going to do that. I'm just thinking about whether I could, and no, not really. I kind of do. It just makes someone that you just everyone's gonna hate.
Yeah,
So why not? But yeah, that
get your party to hate them.
I think the only other thing about Charm Person to go back to Charm Person, the only other thing to
Yes,
add to Charm Person is that if you cast at higher levels, you can cast it on multiple people.
very much like a lot of enchantment style spells, like fear as well. I think you can do that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's I like it for that.
I have nothing more to add to Charm Person. You know my beef with it, and you know that though it may not appear or sound so, I actually do quite like the spell.
Yeah, it's a good spell when used correctly.
Yes.
I understand the pet peeve of misuse of certain spells, just like most any other spell that can be
Mm.
misused.
Hey, what you guess? A good segue into our next topic. We talked about it last week. We're going to talk about it again because we're British and we love to moan,
We do.
and that is hot takes and pet peeves. Hot takes being obviously takes that are particularly spicy, that are not common, that will no doubt get some negative feedback, and of course, pet peeves being just little things that annoy you in the world of Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop RPGs. Rob has told me he has some to talk about, so I'm going to let him talk.
It is something that has sparked debate in, I think, both groups. I don't think we had that much of a debate over it. I know it sparked debate a little bit when the first wave of testing came out for 1D&D. It's a while ago now. It's when we were playing Strahd. And they changed the rules. So it's about getting a natural 20 and getting a natural 1. My hot take is that the current rules in 5th edition are correct. I like them the way they are, which is that in combat, a natural 1, you miss. or you fail, whatever it is you're doing. A natural 20 is a crit. Out of combat, they are simply a dice roll. You add your modifiers. You tell the DM the total result. They decide whether it's a fail or a success based on the total result. In the 1D&D rules, they changed it so that every natural one is always a fail and every natural 20 is always a success.
Mhm.
And there's a number of reasons that I don't like that. One is I think, again, going back to your point about trying to get more than what a player should get out of a situation, I think it's very easy for a lesser experienced DM to not know how to deal with a player saying, "Oh, I want to do this, and I want to tell that shopkeeper to give me everything they've got in their store." And the DM goes, "All right, roll for it." And they get a natural 20, and they go, "Okay, that's a success, right? That has to be a success because that's a natural 20. They have to give me everything." So realistically, in my opinion, that's not a succeedable role because the shopkeeper would be like, "Why would a shopkeeper ever give absolutely everything to somebody for free?"
Mhm.
Unless like maybe on an extreme severe intimidate and you'd already set their shop on fire.
We'd have to
Maybe.
go back to the enchantment discussion. It'd have to be magic. That's the only reason someone would do something like
Exactly. But technically, rules is written in the 1D&D version where a natural 20 is always a success. I think there's an argument to be said that the player has more weight than they currently do in their argument. As an experienced DM, I could still shut that down and say, no, you've got a success, but a success in this situation is not what you're actually asking for. A success is the shopkeeper goes, all right, Joker, stop taking the piss. Get out my shop or buy something before I call the guards. That's the most success they can get out of that situation is that the shopkeeper does not turn completely aggressive towards them for such a stupid and flagrant attempt at like strong arming them.
that. Hmm.
My other peeve is that a natural one, yes, it is the lowest you can roll. I appreciate that. And I've not math hammered it out in a long time, but I know that if you build your character the right way, a natural one could still be over 30 when you add modifiers.
But so, yeah.
That that's not a fail. There is some abilities that you're that good at. If you've got the expert feat, if you've got other things like the flash of genius from the artificer, guidance, the memories of a past life, or being a reborn, the list goes on. There's other
Mhm.
abilities that add to that. You can very easily get um, over 30. I've seen people show. I've not ever properly looked into it, but like watching like Offbeat Outlaw, I've seen him show builds that could get plus 20 on, plus 50 on stealth and stuff like that. So a natural one, when it succeeds higher than what another player could get with a natural 20, you can't tell me on any given day that that's a fail.
That's fair.
That's my personal opinion.
Yeah, I get it. Do you want me to be devil's advocate? Is that what you want right now? I suppose I could do that to some degree.
If you
I
like.
can try and argue. I guess the argument is that was it a broken clock is right twice a day, over it is. So
Yeah,
there's always a possibility that even if you have a perfect plus 30 to your skill, that
yep,
you could still potentially fail.
yeah,
Nothing is a certainty, and that's why like if you roll a natural one, it should automatically be a failure. Don't actually agree with that, but like that's just
yeah.
that would be the devil's advocate, the argument against what you're saying. Um,
I think it really depends on what the role is. There are some things that I can apply unluckiness to more so personally than I can to other things.
mhm,
So if it's, for example, a history check or an arcana check or any knowledge-based check, anything where you're trying to recall information, you're not going to trip and fall. So I mean, yeah, you could say because you were walking and thinking you tripped and fall, but you're not really. You're
mhm,
going to be stood about trying to think of something. It's not like an athletics check or an acrobatics check where your foot could slide on some loose rocks and you can quite easily attribute bad luck or bad foot placement to
mhm.
that. And that also, I think, I mean, rules is written, I'm right anyway, so there is that. But also, if you are expending abilities to boost your score, you are paying a cost as well to get out of that kind of failure. So as a DM, I would be like, right, well, I might not give them the perfect
Mm,
solution to the situation or the knowledge because they rolled a natural one, but I'm going to give them some stuff
mm,
because they expended more resources. Like you only get so many flash of geniuses a day. Uh, in the newer system, guidance was a reaction, so someone has used their reaction to cast guidance on you, or you only get so many memories of a past life a
mm,
day, that sort of thing. So you're expending finite resources to get to those sort of high results. So
mm.
I think that that needs to be acknowledged as well.
Yeah. I think the way I would flavor, say, if what we're talking about, we're using acrobatics, weren't we? Or you were
Yeah,
just a moment ago. If you get a natural one on an acrobatics, but still you're getting over 20 as a result,
yeah,
you can still make that interesting and as flavorful as you want.
yeah,
I think it comes down to the DM. The DM has to say is you step on a rock that gives way because you weren't really paying attention. You were cocky because you always do really well with
yeah,
these sort of dex rolls. You step on a rock, it gives way. You're about to fall off the cliff, but your natural instinct, your experience kicks in, and you manage to rotate your body back round to land safely on this narrow cliff. Something like that, where it's
yeah.
still like, oh look, you almost messed it up.
I kind of don't mind with that because it's not a consequences failure.
Mhm.
I just don't like the idea of. I think realistically, you could say my hot take is that I don't like bad DMs
Mm,
that don't really know how to deal with that kind of like polarizing situation.
yes.
Um, if I was in a campaign as a player and it was discussed in session zero that a natural one is always a fail, then I'm fine with that
Mm,
because consistency has been set,
mhm,
consistency is followed. I also won't go for any kind of bullshit build because I know it's not going to work.
mhm,
But it's like if I've gone for that, even just as Narakis, like all he had was Flash of Genius, and that meant that he could add +5 to
mm,
anything as a reaction. If he had also been a reborn, which isn't that like it's not that metagamey to say, "Oh, I'm a reborn and I'm a artificer." Like that's only a race in a class. It's not
mhm,
like you've taken loads of feats to get. It's like you've taken the lucky feat. It's not like you've
mhm,
taken spellcaster initiate to get guidance,
mhm,
stuff like that. So I don't think it's that meta. I just wouldn't think to do that as much if I knew I couldn't. It's
mm,
just I think it's the idea of that if you would as a baseline follow rules of written and then a DM turns around and says, "Nah, natural one's always a fail." I don't like that attitude
mhm,
because it should be established beforehand.
mhm. Typically, by the way, it is usually always a fail because most of the time people don't have ridiculous pluses.
I think that's another part of the issue is people get used to a natural one usually being a fail.
Like, if I was to continue with a little bit of the devil advocate thing, I do kind of get the idea. There's no point in making a check then if you're always going to succeed,
I agree there too.
because th- well,
If
there's
you
no
were
point
to
in having the dice on the table if you're just going to do it. Like,
for certain checks, yeah. If you were going to say to me, do you want to roll or do you want to use a flash of genius straight off the bat, and do you want
hmm,
to use memories from a past life straight off the bat? Give me some flavour in how you do those things, and we'll just avoid. We won't go for the roll. I would even say that's fine. Um, I'd say I'll give you the middling result for
hmm,
free. Um, but if you want to try and achieve an absolute like a extra bonus level of information or
hmm,
result of a skill check or result of a
hmm,
persuasion check, then that's when the dice come into it. That's when
hmm,
chance comes into it, I suppose.
hmm.
Uh,
Out
yeah,
of curiosity, you just reminded me. Also, I did play a reborn with Emmerich, and I just forgot that there were certain things again because he died and then I moved on to someone else.
yeah.
Knowledge from a past life, I completely forgot about. Have you used that with it?
No, because I forget that he's a reborn sometimes.
I was thinking, I don't remember you ever, because it's not something like we're not a table or a digital table where we don't announce the things that we're using, the abilities we're using. So if you were going to use knowledge from a past life, you would have gone, I'm just going to use knowledge from past life.
Yeah. Do you know why that happened?
You've never done that.
It's happened because D&D Beyond does not do. lineages very well.
No.
When you make something that is a Dampier, a Reborn, or a Hexblood, I think the Hexblood is what it's called, the Hag one
Mm-hmm.
that I've never
Hag one.
played.
Yeah.
It assumes you've always been that, whereas actually, if you read Tasha's, the rules
Yeah.
are that you could have become that halfway through your
Yes.
life. Like, and it started off as just the
And
rules for an
yeah.
Owlin.
And Rick Tins, I think, is what it's from it. The
Oh,
lineage.
yeah, sorry, Tasha's is what I said. I meant Van Richten's. Talking rubbish. But yeah, Fitz started off as an Owlin technically, even though he's a Raven
Yeah.
folk or whatever we've skinned him as. And then he died and became a Reborn as part of his pact, being that he's an undead warlock.
Mm.
But D&D
An
Beyond
undead
doesn't
warlock
like
that serve the celestial being, which is in of itself a great thing that we came up with. Shows you don't have to stick to the to things that's written. But go
Well, yeah, exactly, exactly. I mean, the celestial being the Reaper, but
on.
it's a celestial body in that I suppose it functions.
Hmm.
They're more of like a function, aren't they, the Reapers? But
Yeah.
but anyway, yeah, it is what it is. I forget that I've got it. I remember the other stuff like don't breathe, don't eat, don't sleep.
Yeah. You brought. Yeah. We
Um,
brought that many times. Yeah.
those are just seem to be like part of my memory. I really, until just this conversation, had forgotten that past lives was a thing. I need to bring that in a lot more and do it.
Well,
Yeah,
now you might tomorrow when we play. You
yeah.
might do it. Um.
I'm gonna have to. What I'm gonna have to do is I've gotten to the habit because I know the books so well,
Hmm.
and I've moved them downstairs onto a shelf just for space because the office has got, well, it's a mess. Um, that I haven't read Van Richten's in a while. So yeah, I could probably do with having that up here since that I am combining things and my character sheet on D&D Beyond doesn't necessarily match the full extent of what Fitz is.
Yeah. It's maybe I'll just remind you. It's partly I am the dungeon master. Sometimes you maybe you just need to prod, but
Did
I'll
I
be honest.
fail?
Rob makes ridiculous builds anyway that I don't want him to have success all the time. I'm not going to bring it up.
Yeah, but
To be fair,
but that's the thing. Like, Fitz has failed plenty of things because he doesn't have the best intelligence, for example.
mhm.
So when you've asked him to, I've had some shockers of rolls last session. I got a couple of threes and fours. I know that, um, but that's fine. I've made him to be extremely good at charisma and not fantastic at strength or intelligence. He's very dexterous as well. He's great at picking pockets. Not as good as some other as rogues because
Mhm.
they can quite easily get expert at that. But is what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose there. I mean, I talked about many of my couple of hot takes, couple of pet peeves last week. But I'll just talk about the one that was present in my mind because we talked about it just before we started recording, and that was just the consistency of world building that it lacked in general Forgotten Realms, Faerun,
Yeah,
Toril lore. And I feel like there's not a maybe I'm wrong, but it doesn't feel like there is a good place to go to. I like the Forgotten Realms wiki. Once you know how to use it, it's all right. Is everything linked and properly set up in the way that it should? No, but it does the job. But
I agree there.
if that is the only source of the lore in its entirety that you can go to, it's the place you're gonna go to. But being that I was looking at going through all the like we talked about how uh before the podcast, so I'll repeat myself. There are three essentially of the main cosmologies used within the world building of the Forgotten Realms, um, and that is the Great Wheel cosmology.
Yep.
So that's where you've got the wheel with the material plane in the middle, along with the Feywild, the Shadowfell, and then the elemental planes around it, and then beyond around that you've got all the um, different outer planes that are all in a certain order. The top point being good, the bottom being evil, left to right is lawful to chaos.
Is that the one that's in the player's handbook?
Yes, I think I don't know if it's in the player's handbook, but might be in the DM's guide.
Maybe.
They're all in the DM's guide.
Oh, are they?
It might also be
Oh,
in the player's handbook as well,
I'm sure there's one that's in the PBH. Carry on.
probably. But yes, the big thing with the Great Wheel, which I'm sure I can put on the screen, but the the Great Wheel, it's fine. It's just it's a little rigid for my liking. And it when you start bringing in things like the outlines and stuff like that, it doesn't really make any
Yeah,
sense anymore. And then when uh, you start looking at all the lore about how pretty much every freaking plane then has planes within its plane, like layers. So the most common one, obviously, everyone knows, most people heard of, is the Nine Hells, which I'm
yeah.
actually quite fine with. The Nine Hells kind of makes sense to me. But then you got like the Seven Heavens
I
of
don't really get the heavens one, to be
Celestia.
honest.
Hades has it all. Acheron has loads, and it's just like, oh, what about the Abyss? There's the infinite layers of the Abyss. Like, there's infinite layers. Like, it's just like again with the Abyss, I'm kind of like not so bothered about it. It's the idea of like pure chaos, right? So
Yeah,
pure evil, chaos evil, chaotic evil. So I'm kind of fine with it. And that seems a bit all over the place. But if that was just what they stuck with and that's what they said it was, I'm fine. And then at some point, I'm not exactly what point it was. Probably around fourth edition, third or fourth edition, I think. They then switched to the world tree. The world tree is taken from Norse mythology, and they
oh, the Yggdrasil.
and the Yggdrasil tree, and with like its roots being in, I don't know, one place, and branches are all the outer planes, and the actual trunk is the material plane, and that sort of stuff. I can get why they didn't keep it because I don't also care particularly for that one because I think it's a bit um if it's only supposed to be like an analogy or a metaphor, I don't see what has to be a giant tree. Um,
That one.
yeah, that one. That's the Great Wheel.
It's 303.
There you go. Of the Player's Handbook. But yeah, the World Tree, and but with the World Tree, they renamed a lot of stuff. They renamed like some planes became other planes, and some planes were rammed together. But for the most part, it was like now we have Alfheim and Svartalheim and
Yeah,
Jotunheim, and we now have Isgard, and House of Nature is one of them. But we still keep a couple here or there. But we're gonna.
it's just messy.
It's suddenly switching from one, and you can't say oh, like they're in world. Um, the way they explain it in world is like some people believed it was this, and some people believed it was that. But as soon as you can start going to a plane, when there's plane shifting and there's portals,
Yeah,
you can't no longer have that. There literally you have to decide on what the planes are. It can't be a theory anymore. It becomes a reality.
I think
The
you can have it.
layout can change, but
Uh,
the actual planes should not change. Keep your consistency with your world building. Sorry, bro.
you can. No, it's fine. You can have it that it says these are some of the beliefs,
Hmm.
but I would always then want this is the correct
Mhm.
answer. This is actually how it works. This
Which
is why these are the people that believe this. These are the people that believe this. These are the people that believe this. But the reasons that they have gone to this conclusion is because they've discovered and these of the actual real situation. I don't mind that stuff if it was like that, but it's
mhm.
not. It's just a big old mess,
It
and
is.
I think that's
It's like
just frustrating.
because even now they're not even in the world tree. They moved on to the world axis, and I assume the world axis is where we are now. Don't, but then you look at the fifth edition Player's Handbook. It's got the Great Wheel in it, so we're in the Great Wheel again. But all the Forgotten Realms wiki reads as though the world axis is the um the current way is done. And when I was reading some bit of the lore about Shar and stuff like that, it reads very much like that would be the case. Um, it's just like, okay, well then you've also decided now that the elemental planes collapse into the elemental chaos and all this stuff. So you're making big world. You're not just making like theoretical changes. That's big whole world changes. That's like you had these literal worlds of fire, water, earth, and air that are now essentially amorphous. Is that the right? Yeah, amorphous. They change shape. They're in chaos.
Yeah,
And I was like, all right. this is why people create their own multiverses and play in their own
Yeah.
worlds, because you don't have one consistent through line with your lore, and I think it needs it. If I was honest, and then when they eventually get round to finishing whatever the hell they're doing with one D&D, then maybe it's time that they do the very what they did with Star Wars, create a freaking like choose someone as your lore master. Maybe they have a lore master. I have no idea. Um, and choose what the actual facts are, and then on top
I
of that, you add the beliefs.
I would absolutely love it if they would release a nice big book that was just a Historia,
Yeah.
the complete. You could even say this is how it was in third edition. This is how it was in 3.5, 4, whatever. You could even have that. You could have this is how it is. This is how it is at this point in time, which is when fifth edition starts.
Hmm.
And then you could even because the good thing about that is that you'd be able to say uh, this is when Descent into Avernus
Hmm.
takes place, and that's why these characters are in it.
Hmm.
This is when this takes place, and that's why
Hmm.
this god is not in it because they're dead at this point. And you can
Yeah.
have that. Whereas like now, all we have now is just a big fat mess. Like you can have a cleric believe in any god, even though some are dead, some are in different pantheons than they started in, some
Yeah.
have been in different pantheons in
Some are
different
now two
books.
people rather than one.
Is that
We
big?
talk about teach. Well, we could talk about teach, for example, right? Teach, which is from the original Greek pantheon, right? I was reading about Lathander again, my boy, the Morning God.
The body.
And he originally is in a romantic relationship with a goddess, or at least in a way very romantic. His first love was Teach, right? Teach was goddess of change and fortune. Who, and if you use a Donwell pantheon, Evander is based on Teach. Um,
Oh, fair.
and there's a whole really nice little comment about how like they once spent some time just sat on the back of a space whale watching galaxies form. Very romantic. And then she was broken into two people, and that broke his heart. He moved on because he went and he's now with Shantae, or she's however that's pronounced, Shanti, the goddess of she's a nature goddess associated with like agriculture.
I mean,
Um,
I can see why he would be drawn to her.
yeah. But it was because they both make sense. But like,
Yeah,
but it's like there's a god you've just split into two, and I like Tamora and Bishaba. Don't get me wrong. Like that, I like
oh, is
them.
that where they came
Yeah,
from?
that's where they came from. Yeah.
Yeah,
And I like those two. I'm using them in Stormare. They're in my the extended pantheon.
yeah.
Um, but it's just it's one of those where clearly each edition they wanted to have like new lore, but they wanted to have it as a run through. So it's like up to the year 1000, this is first edition. Up to the year 3000, this is second edition. When they should have just gone, actually, we're just going to change the world with the edition. That makes sense. Like, there's been this
Yeah,
many thousand years. This is the history. Now we're introducing new rules, new spells, new things. We're changing it. We're retconning it. It would have just been easier to retcon it. And then
yeah,
all the wikis, all the books you read would be correct, and you're not trying to interpret the meaning of anything that's you're reading on the page. Of how
yeah.
freaking Lathander became Amantur, who became Lathander, or whatever.
This is why my uh, law knowledge
Mm.
is not very good.
Mhm.
Because it's such a mess, and I find it so overwhelming going to try and read up on
Mm.
stuff that I only do it when I need to.
Yeah, I think for me, I do it because maybe just I like the challenge, the puzzle.
Yeah,
And I'm looking for the good little bits of inspiration, the little things that are just, oh, that's really cool. So then you can use that.
yeah, I agree there. Like I liked so like the gods that I've used Bahamut a lot, and I like the stuff that is in the wiki for him. With all the little
Bahamut, by the way, it is done dirty in most of Forgotten Realms lore because
yeah.
he's like secondary to Torm. He's Torm's bitch. And I'm like, really? The freaking Platinum Dragon,
Not in any of mine, is not.
not even allowed on the upper layers of Mount Celestia, apparently. He's got these little. He's allowed in the lower layers. That's what he makes it out as if he's not allowed to go up there. You're like, why? Oh, what? He's a good guy. What's wrong with you? So I'm like, no, Bahamut. There's very few that are more powerful than that boy in my head.
Yeah, he's the Dragon King. He's what it is.
He is. Um, but yeah,
But that's kind of goes into what I do. Is I look at the cool stuff
yeah,
and I go, I like that, 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 that. I'm taking those, but I'm building this personality, and this god is my own version of that. And I think that's probably why they keep it like such a mess, because they want to give people inspiration to do their own homebrew. But if you're
sure,
not
but
doing your own homebrew, then it's difficult.
yeah, but you're just discouraging people from buying your own books.
Yeah, it's a weird one. I don't know.
Because if you have to you have to buy every single book just to understand the lore, then no, not happening. Um, but yeah, that's my gripe because I've been doing a lot of world building unnecessarily world building, but it's what I do. I have no more to add on that subject. That is my pet peeve, gripe, uh, what grinds my gears. It's not really a hot take. I imagine it annoys a lot of people, so not
Yeah,
quite a hot take. Um, it's not like small enough to really be considered a pet peeve, I suppose.
it's a frustration.
It's a frustration. And now I moaned in the tradition of our people. Hewing and moaning, that is what we British people do,
We are good at both of those things.
for the most part. But we're about time, so I am going to call it on this episode as episode number 11 of the Awkwardly Big Dice podcast with Dan and Rob, the quote unquote greatest DMs of all time. I said it, not Rob, so blame me if it's not true.
Uh, well, we'll leave that for the players to decide.
This podcast available on YouTube, which is probably where you are watching it. If you listen to it on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts, where it is also available, you can go and watch it on YouTube. See our faces and Rob's sickly face.
Sorry. You can see my lens flare at least.
So check us out on those platforms. Also available on Instagram and on Twitter. You'll also find that we put out what are called shorts on YouTube or reels on Instagram, or just little clips from our podcast. Usually about 2 to 3 a week. I've been two lately, 2 to 3 a week. And they just hopefully remind you that there's a full podcast waiting for you on YouTube. So please like, subscribe, leave a comment, and I hope all your dice roll 20s if they are capable of being, you know, d20s. Or if it's a d4, a 4, a d6, 6, 8, so on.
Max rolls for all.
Max rolls for all.
I am going to do something right now which is similar to what you did last week. I have a hot take that I know you share.
Okay,
We're not going to discuss it. It
okay.
is just a fact. Spears are shit and they should be amazing. There, end the stream.